Warm welcome. I'm Tom Hassan, and for those I haven't had a chance to meet, I am president of School Year Abroad, and I do hope to meet you. SYA is getting back out on the road, and we have a number of places that we'll visit over the course of this academic year, and again, hope to meet you in person. So welcome. Thank you for being part of this afternoon's program. I also know that this is being recorded, so we'll have a chance to share this with other alums after the fact. So again, thank you those here today and those who will see us after the fact. And I do want to say it's a wonderful mixture of folks on today's program here, not only Holland, Goss, Lynch, who's the president of the board of trustees at SYA. She'll be speaking in a minute or two. We also have our award winners, and on joining us are a mixture of our alums. We do have some faculty and staff. And I do want to do a big shout out to Woody Halsey, who's on this. And Woody was the SYA's very first president after serving in many different roles, including resident director over in France. Woody, you have built a tremendous foundation upon which we have built SYA. And so thank you for that. And also, I want to acknowledge and welcome a number of current parents. Great to have you on here, and a big thank you for sharing your children with us. We value that, and they're already off to a great start. So again, thank you one and all. Let me just give you a little bit of the pace of today's program. I will say a few words, give you an update on where SYA is, then I'll turn it over to Holland, and then we'll have that wonderful conversation with our award winners. So look forward to that. If during all of this that you have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A box, and if we have time, we'll get to those. You have submitted some already, and during the course of this webinar, we'll end up answering those questions as well. So again, thank you, welcome. So I'm absolutely delighted to have students back with us. As folks remember, in the winter, it seems so long ago, but in the winter of 2020, we had to evacuate our students, first those in Beijing, then followed by those in Italy, and then finally those in France and Spain. And actually what was wonderful is that we're able to continue with those students for the remaining months of the school year via online. And it was really a wonderful way for them to see in real time the people they had grown to love and be part of, and see what was happening to them over in Europe and China during the early stages of the pandemic. Then we worked incredibly hard to see if we could get in the following school year our students over. We tried and tried, but it was clear health and safety issues really trumped that moment. And so for the very first time in SYA's 50+ year history, we had no students for a year. So that was during the 2021 school year. Then last year, we're able to bring back students to our European campuses. So last year we had students in Viterbo, we had them in Rennes, and we had them in Zaragoza. And it was a wonderful, wonderful year. I think the kids were just so happy to be out from behind a computer screen and able to live life and to meet new people, and not only their classmates, but their wonderful host families and the faculty. And I have to say, as an administrator, they are incredibly well behaved that year, which is great. And I think it's, and very grateful. And it was very sweet to watch them, very grateful for the adults who took care of them overseas. So it was just been a wonderful school year last year. And this year we welcome them back again to those 3 sites. They left, Italy left at the end of August. There's a special festival in Viterbo. So we got them over to see that centuries old festival there. And then quickly followed by those going over to France and Spain. So SYA looks and feels a lot like it has for now 58 years. Students are totally immersed in life there. A few differences. One is every once in a while we have to mask them up if there's a little outbreak of COVID. But things have really relaxed this year in comparison to last year. So they're in full wonderful SYA intrepid spirit force. So that's great to see. The other thing that's different, and this has been actually years in the making for us, we have done a lot more intentional kind of work of getting kids, as I describe it, out of their classroom seats. And in fact, we don't start as we used to by just throwing kids into classes. We actually have a very prescribed immersion unit that lasts a week and a half or so. And so it's really a chance for them to get to know their host families and comfortable with them, to get to know the area and comfort with that, and to get to know their peers and their faculty members. So we do a lot of exercises that literally aren't sitting in classrooms for those first few weeks. So they've just finished that off, and they're now in their full schedules, which includes classes in the target language. And then also, as we have a hallmark of SYA, we have teachers from America who teach the English class and teach the math classes. So they're in regular session right now. The other thing that's different is that we have added in each setting once a week a field work day. And so that again gets the students in the community. Sometimes it's right there. Sometimes we bring them to a larger city nearby. But it's a chance for them to practice what they're learning in classes. And sometimes it might be focused on a very specific thing, something larger. And so we're really trying to make that classroom the place. And so that's, place-based curriculum is really big with SYA. And the students have loved it. I mean, we survey kids, and that has always been a highlight for them over the past few years that we've been doing it. And then what they haven't experienced yet, but will, both at the end of this first semester and at the end of the year, we'll ask them to do some immersion project we call a capstone project, where they pick something of their choosing and really roll up their sleeves. It can run the gamut. A young woman in France a few years ago interviewed all the women politicians in Rennes and had them come by and talk about being a woman politician in France. And kind of used her obviously linguistic skills, but also her own interest in politics to do that. There was a boy in Italy a few years ago who was an apprentice to a cobbler and actually made a pair of shoes. And he spent late afternoons with this older gentleman and, immersed in speaking Italian and learning a trade. So those kinds of things are just fun to watch, and kids really, again, immerse themselves and use their skills that they've been developing. So that's really great. The other thing I'd love to tell you about too is that we have a robust enrollment. I mean, in fact, it's this amazing bounce. I think, again, it's kids who, I call it the post-COVID bounce of just wanting to be out and about. So we're filled to the brim in our 3 sites. And that means, in the upper 60s in Spain, in the mid 60s in France, and in Italy about 45 kids. So really nice to see. We also have introduced a few slots for semester students because we have found over the years a great demand for that. We are, again, I'm going to have to say, primarily a year-long program, but we do have some slots for kids because of extracurricular activities back home or monetary issues. Will come for a semester, and we balance that out so that semester 1 kids there in the fall, an equal number of those semester 2 kids will come into the sites. So, but that's about a class of section of class that we're doing. So that's kind of a quick overview. Again, delighted to see the enthusiasm of the students, the faculty rolling up their sleeves, getting involved with creative ways to get the kids out of the class and using their skills. And so now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Holland Goss Lynch, who has been on the board for several years and has been named our chair, our president of the board, has done a phenomenal job. This is now her 2nd year in that role. She's the first alumna to occupy that chair. And she's going to describe the work of the board and how that's set up and what kinds of things we're thinking about in the short and longer term. So Holland, thanks for being here today, and thanks for giving the update.
Well, thank you, Tom. And it's always great to hear an update. And it just takes me back to 1985, 86 in Rennes and remembering all those great times, as I'm sure that's the case for many of the alums who are on the webinar today. And a special shout out, hi, Woody. He was my resident director back in Rennes those many years ago. So nice to have you on the webinar, and nice to have everyone. Thank you all for taking time out for SYA today. I thought I would just start and talk a little bit about the makeup of the board, because the School Year Abroad board is somewhat unique in its makeup. We have 20 board members, and one of the things that makes us quite different from others is that our bylaws state that we have one of the seats on the board is reserved for either the head of school or a senior administrator from one of our 3 founding schools, Andover, Exeter, and St. Paul's. We're an entirely independent organization, but we maintain that tie to those founding schools. We also have a mandate for 4 heads of school from our member school population. So that's very unusual to have that number of heads of school on a school board, but it's really, really helpful and insightful and great for our work. The rest of the board is made up of civilians, we're called, and it's mostly alums, but we also have people who are affiliated with SYA in some other way. Maybe they taught, maybe they were there as a kid when their parents were teaching, a past parent, things like that. And in addition to the heads of school, many of those civilian board members really have a deep background in education. We have teachers, we have a former head of school, someone who's in college counseling, secondary school admissions. So a really good and deep interest in secondary school, in particular education, which is terrific. It's a very friendly board, really engaged, really dedicated, and it's a pretty diverse board in terms of lived experience and diversity of thought. And so we bring a lot of different perspectives to the table, yet it's always a collegial conversation. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that everybody's got a tie to SYA. And of course, one of our big mission at SYA is to encourage intercultural competence. And we say in our mission that we're all about the adventure of learning about other people, languages, and culture. And that really comes through in a lot of our conversations. So at the moment, our current work is, we're always a big picture group. We think about long-term and high-level issues that face this school. We leave the operations in the very capable hands of Tom. And we were fortunate to have our spring board meeting this year in Viterbo on campus. So we were able to get to know the campus, get to know the kids, see the curriculum head on, which was really, really impactful for all of us. And Tom was talking about the capstone project, and I got talking to a student who her capstone, she was an artist, and her capstone involved a lot of sketching in Viterbo, and it was just incredible what she had chosen to draw and to capture. And it was everything from architectural detail to some of the native plants. It was just quite beautiful, and she'd colored them, and I was very pleased to see it, and it felt very much like a great end to her year. So anyway, that was just a little sidebar on one of the great things about being in Viterbo. But while we were there, we had a really deep dive. It was almost like a retreat for us, a deep dive into a visioning session. It was a guided conversation with an expert in this type of work. And it got us all really thinking about the mission of SYA, the purpose of it, really pulling out all of the strengths of the program. And now we're taking that work, plus just a lot of other thinking that's been happening in various different ways, and developing a strategic plan to guide us for the next 3 or so years. That's about the lifespan of a good strategic plan these days. So we are deep into that work. It will be a real focus of our fall board meeting, which is happening at the end of October. We're looking forward to that. And again, we're just trying to always look at how we can really leverage the enduring strengths of the program and stay relevant and abreast of all the developments in the educational space that in which we operate. So that's our our big work, and that's really where we're headed as we go into our meeting this fall. I would say overall across the board, there's a tremendous sense of optimism as we're moving forward and onward and consistently transforming the lives of high school students. And we really are keeping our minds and work focused on developing creative and critical thinking, intercultural competence, language proficiency, independence, interdependence, all of those qualities that are so well developed in the course of a student's time on school year abroad, and which I would say are hallmarks of the two award winners, which we're going to be talking to in a little while today. Cheo and Margaret really exemplify the qualities that SYA is working towards promoting. So I know we'll get to them after. I think we have a quick fast 5 Q&A with Tom, where he's going to take some of the questions that have been submitted, and I'm happy to answer them as well. But Tom, I'll turn it back to you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Holland. Thanks for those words and your incredible service. That's why I very much appreciate all that. I want to mention too, Holland was talking about the work that we're doing in planning, which includes a strategic plan. Also, what we're rolling up our sleeves to do is another accreditation of SYA. We are accredited by New England Association of Schools and Colleges. And so this work is not only important to SYA, but important to that incredibly exhaustive look at all the work we do. So 10 years ago, we're for the first time accredited, and we're up for another one next year. So it's all good work. There are two kind of questions that came through that I want to address before the new ones are coming on. And one of them was about some specific questions about what's the calendar like in Ren this year and all of that. If people have current parents have specific questions, you're getting to know your resident director, feel free to always connect with him or her. We see the relationship these days as kind of a 3-legged stool, which is there's the parents, the child, and the resident director, and the faculty. So there's much more kind of back and forth in the wonders of modern technology. It's really pretty good to be able to have those conversations. So feel free to reach out, and also they serve it as a clearinghouse, particularly the resident director, for any questions you have. The other issue that's come out is something my daughter's taught me, which is called FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, and how there are students a little worried when they leave their wonderful friends and nest egg and all of that back at school of what's it going to be like. I'm going to be overseas and all the stuff's happening back at home. Again, technology has actually helped in ways of kids don't feel totally isolated, although I do push them before they leave to try to keep that iPhone kind of away from a lot of English and a lot of tether back home, because those who were at SYA many years ago and didn't have that understand the real power of being totally immersed in life in Italy, Spain, France, China. It's just be in the moment with your friends there. I think the fear of missing out actually by the end of the year is that the students back home wish they were doing an SYA experience. And there's also a little bit of the parents having a fear of missing out too. And again, having that connection, the resident directors will be in touch with updates about what's going on. They share pictures, all of that. And these days that parents do come over, we ask them not to come over until kind of December-ish at the earliest, but parents do come on over and see their children, get to see the life of the school. And so they're welcome to do that. And again, working with the RD about what a good timing of that would be really helpful. And oftentimes the parents love to meet the host families in person. And that's just a wonderful thing. And Holland was mentioning that we're over in Italy. One of the best moments for me, and I know others, was that we each went to a host family dinner with a student. And so we got a chance to really eat really well in Italy, of course. That was just tremendous food. But B, much more importantly, was to see the comfort of the student and the family and the student translating for us, and just the warmth and connection. I just was, every time I do that, blown away by that just that bond that students have. And there was a moment when we celebrated SYA's 50th in France. Actually, my snapshot moment of SYA happened at that event, which was, there was a woman there with probably 15 SYA people around her. And it turned out that she had hosted these students over the years. And it was just like, wow, that's the secret sauce of SYA right there. And what was fun too, is that these people might have heard these names, but they didn't know each other because it's a distinct year. And so it was just fun to see this whole thing of people just connecting each other and talking about the great memories they have with that host family. So that's a little bit of the questions that have come up. Let me just see if there's anything else that, let's see, there's a few other questions here. Typical Christmas holiday. Yeah, Christmas holiday these days, usually what happens is there's a event that we do that's open to the host families and any American families who come over. That's right at the end of the December, right before the break. Oftentimes students like to celebrate the holiday with the host family, but then go off, if their American parents are there, to go off after that. So that's usually the pace that happens. Obviously, not all students' parents can get over there. I'm proud that what we've done too is that through our capital campaign, which is an incredibly successful first ever comprehensive campaign for us, we have developed a pot of money so that we can use for financial aid kids who might need some help with travel or incidentals, a winter coat or whatever, so that those students who are whose parents can't get there and don't have the money to do stuff, that we're able to support them in that. So that's been a wonderful thing to see. So that's great. And so I think we can move to the next piece, which is I want to describe.
Sorry, Tom. Yeah, there was a question about the number of applicants that we get.
Okay. Two things about applicants. One is that most applicants who apply, the yield is really high because these kids have heard about SYA and know if they get in, they're going to go. Unlike the college or independent school process where they're applying to 50 different things, and so we have a robust, the semester program has actually increased our applications, and it was really competitive for us because we just have a few slots for them. So we're building back our application numbers, and the COVID stuff has been a big bounce for that. And our yield in the end, when we admit kids, is probably in the neighborhood of 85%, which is really high. Again, it's the kids who go through the process and know that this is what they want. And I would say the other thing that's been really good for us is that we were able to bring the resident directors in early to the admissions process. So through Zoom, that they can Zoom with families who are interested, say in France, Mina Kadir is on the Zoom with them early in the process. It used to be that families would only meet Mina at the airport when kids were departing. So this, again, I think helps with our yield, but also helps parents and kids feel more comfortable in going over. And so, again, RDs play such an incredible role for us, and they are the point person for parents and students on everything. And we are blessed. We have just a quick note here. Pat Scanlon is now our longest serving resident director in SYA's history. I think he's up to 18 years. And then our newest one is Rocio, who's in Spain. She has absolutely hit the ground running, and she many years was at St. Paul's, so knows the SYA well through those connections. And her husband is also involved in life in Zaragoza. So that's great to see. So let me shift gears right now and talk just for a minute about the awards themselves, and then I'll ask Holland to talk about specifically our winners, our wonderful winners this year. So we have two awards. We asked our community to nominate people, And so keep that in mind as we move forward over the years. If you have someone you feel live up to the people you'll hear from today, but also just in these awards, please pass those along. The trustees then consider all of this and vote on the award winners, and Holland will talk about that. But there are two. One is the Stephen Foster Spain 65 Exemplary Service Award, and that really was established for those who demonstrate extraordinary service to SYA, exemplified by Stephen Foster. And just a word about Stephen, he was one of the 11 boys in the fall of '64 who got on a boat, kind of remember that, got on a boat and sailed across the Atlantic over to Spain. And they were truly intrepid. That was when we were called schoolboys abroad. And Stephen, from that moment, has been incredibly dedicated to SYA. And so we look for people who follow in his big footsteps to award. The second award is for our Distinguished Alumni Service Award, and that's to an alum who's really given to his or her profession, to the wider world, and you'll understand that Cheo is a great recipient of that. So again, if you know folks who will fill these awards in future years, please let us know. You'll get a email about that in the spring, and the trustees then vote on that. So I'm going to turn this back to Holland, and you can introduce our award winners this year.
Oh, I'm delighted to do so. And just also will say we're really grateful to the awards committee, who's led by fellow trustee and alumna Allison Temple Bacon, for the awards committee's role in this process, and for recommending these two wonderful recipients to the board. And like Tom, I will encourage you all to consider nominating a deserving alum or a parent or volunteer, and you'll get an email about that when the nomination's open. So first, I'm delighted to introduce this year's Stephen M. Foster Spain 65 Exemplary Service Award recipient, Margaret Conklin, class of School Year Abroad, France, 1974. Margaret was nominated by several members of her class for her outstanding contributions and volunteer leadership to SYA and beyond. Margaret's been a tireless supporter of SYA through fundraising, hosting events, co-chairing committees of milestone celebrations, including SYA's and SYA France's 50th celebrations, and being on the committee for the campaign for SYA, which was our first ever comprehensive capital campaign, and which wrapped up not so long ago. I'm losing track of time, but recently, anyway, tremendous effort. And next, I'm also delighted to introduce Cheo Hodari Coker, the class of SYA Spain 1989. He is this year's SYA Distinguished Alumni Award recipient for his outstanding contributions to and leadership in his professional endeavors. Cheo's impressive career so far includes his work as a showrunner, journalist, author, screenwriter, producer, and more recently, a college lecturer. Nominator and classmate Wanda Mann said that Cheo's success in Hollywood has reaffirmed that SYA did more than hone our language skills. Our year in Barcelona nurtured our talents and was a building block to achieving our dreams. Great words, Wanda. So thank you both for joining us today. And on behalf of the Board of Trustees and as a fellow alum, we could not be prouder to honor you and your awards. And we received a few questions ahead of time, so we'll try to include those in our conversation, but congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Holland.
So I'm happy to jump in and ask some questions, and you can, answer away. I think the first question, which is a question that many SYA alums are asked, but I'd love to hear your words. How did the SYA experience have an impact on your lives, both in big and small ways? And Margaret, why don't we start with you, and then Cheo, go to you.
Thanks, Holland, and thank you to Tom, and I have to say thank you to Woody, because my association with School Year Abroad started even earlier than in France, because Woody was teaching French at St. Paul's when I was a student there. So you know, I go way back to the early days, maybe not quite as far as Stephen, but having gone to school to Rennes in 1973. So where I was, by the way, part of the first class of girls at St. Paul's, I think that maybe paved the way for another adventure in France. So I think the big takeaway for me from my year in France is really giving me the confidence to realize that I probably could pursue whatever career I chose in a foreign country, or, you know, in a place that wasn't familiar to me. I think it just taught me that I could live abroad and probably make a go of it, right? Learn the language, you know, explore the country or the city, meet new people, and enrich my life in ways that, you know, that really, I think, are unique from spending time in a different culture, in a different language, in a different place. That's really, I think, because after that, I went, you know, college, and I've lived abroad in different places, and I've, you know, forced my children to go abroad and go into a foreign school system. And I just think that, you know, that phrase that we use a lot, I forget, at home in the world, is something that School Year Abroad really does instill in its students. And then other things that I, of course, took away was like a love of French food and wine. But, you know, discovering, I think, foreign cultures. And so that's really, you know, I think it's informed the rest of my adult life.
Great. Thank you. And Cheo.
No pressure. I don't know. It's okay. So, well, first, I just looking through the chat, I'm seeing so many familiar names, but I have to shout out one of my members of the coalition, Ben. I also see Wanda. Thank you again for nominating me, Sylvie, and other SYA Barcelona 89 alums. It's hard for me to answer that question because my time in Spain, it stays with me every single day. And it's not just the ability to live in a different culture and speak another language. It gives you a confidence that anytime that you face something that you're unfamiliar with, that to be comfortable being uncomfortable. It teaches you how to adapt. It teaches you how to think outside the box. The most important thing that from a language perspective, because people say, "Oh, well, why not just do an immersion, you know, very quickly, or why spend so much time over there?" It's not just about learning the language and the culture, but you know, you learn to think in the language. That was the most important lesson about becoming bilingual: is not to translate what you're thinking in English into Spanish. Is that cuando estás hablando español, hay que pensar en español, and that little channel gives you the ability to say, okay, all right, I've never written a screenplay before, but if I can learn the building blocks of writing a screenplay, it's a different extension of language than I use as a journalist. The observational skills that I use as a journalist can apply to this new medium. Television, it's all, they're basically different languages, but because you as a teenager learned how to do this, you just find all these different ways to apply it. And again, I absolutely agree with what Margaret said in terms of being at home in the world. You're never in a situation where you feel out of place, and you're okay when you don't understand what's going on around you. Or I think the most important thing about learning a different language, living in a different culture, and I wish more people did it, I really do, it's because of the fact that when you live in a different culture and you are starting from scratch, you understand very quickly that, you know, your accent and the way that you speak a language has nothing to do with your intelligence. And so when you come back to the United States and you're meeting people that might not speak the best English or might have heavy accents, you understand from the perspective of having lived outside your own culture not to be judgmental. And, you know, without getting into the politics of the last, you know, 4.5 years and beyond, I think it's important that we understand ourselves as citizens of the world. And because of the fact that school year abroad is now expanded beyond France and Spain to other places, I think only increases, those opportunities.
Yeah, I would echo that too. I just say the other term I think of is resilience. It teaches you sort of how to deal with adversity or discomfort, as Cheo says. So I think that's another great, quality that students take away from, being in a sort of difficult or at times very challenging environment for, for what used to be a year and maybe is often less than a year now, but really, I feel that that I'm just less afraid of disaster, I guess.
It's also, with technology, it's interesting because, okay, I'm laughing because I'm just having so many memories of '89 and being over in Barcelona that year. I think had I had an iPhone back then, I don't know if I ever would have come back. I mean, because the ability because that was the hardest part about being in Spain in 1989 was because I was a huge hip hop fan. I was cut off from the music for the most part. I remember we used to read magazines and there would be like lists of the top songs and we had no idea what they sounded like. I mean, nowadays with the internet, you can pick any song or hear about something, Twitter, and it's just like, but back then you had to wait for something to arrive. Or you would hear about a television show, you would read about something and you would feel cut off. Now, like with Netflix and everything else, you're not really missing as much. You don't have to go to Telefonica to make a long distance call that's going to cost you $30. I mean, now with WhatsApp and everything else, you're in communication with everybody. But then at the same time, it's also important, like Tom said, to completely immerse yourself in the culture that you're in. That's if you really want to become fluent, that's the way to do it. And it's, those of us who started speaking Spanish amongst ourselves and when we were out in the world, went through the embarrassment of not sounding great until we could catch up and really, get fluent. By the end of the year, we had confidence in being able to speak with anyone. And that was definitely reflective and different than some of us who were, just only hung out amongst ourselves and only spoke English and didn't really get out there. So I think it's important to just, to really immerse yourself as much as possible. Although the irony is everybody, no matter where you go, everybody, they all love American music and they all sing the songs in perfect English, even though they can't speak it. It's there are all these different little weird idiosyncrasies that you discover about the world, but it's just the opportunity. Someone asked a question about whether or not students should go back for Christmas, and as a parent of 3, I can understand wanting your child to come back. But having been somebody that was in that situation, if you go back even for 2 weeks, you basically lose all the fluency that you've gained up until that point. It would, for a football analogy, it would be like a quarterback taking a vacation right before playoffs and then trying to get back into the sync of the game. You're just not gonna. You're going to miss out on family stuff, but for the sake of the game, it's probably more important that you stay closer to the team, so to speak. But then again, I mean, it's not as much of a sacrifice when you think about what you're trying to learn. And because there's not a lack of communication because of technology, I think that there's a way to kind of maybe discover a happy medium.
Yeah, I was going to just add to that to say, of course, in 73 and 74, we didn't even have phones. We had to write aerograms to communicate with our parents. And, but I think one reason, my closest friends actually from high school are from my school year abroad experience. And I think there were 60 of us. And at that time it was 50-50 boys and girls. It did, I don't know why I do know why, I guess it's shifted somewhat, but we went on vacation together, all of us, all the time. And we had to take bus rides overnight together. And I think I just think being forced to be together and get along and so forth just created these bonds, and also this sense of tolerance, that people are different. They might be more cool or less cool, but I think I could get together with those 60 people. I remember every single one of them, and, have a good conversation. And I'm extraordinarily close to some of them, and especially my twin sister, which is just, but it just, as I said, so I think in a way it said, go out and, make new friends and so forth, but having this close experience, intense experience with a group of your peers is really important too.
Yeah, well, it's again, I'm just thinking about when we first went to Spain. We all, the grand majority of us, met at JFK, and we flew TWA. It's now a hotel. If you go to JFK, there's actually TWA hotel. Like it's a movie set, because catch me where you can. The Leonardo DiCaprio movie was also shot in the old TWA terminal, which is now a hotel. But it was, there was this airline called TWA. We flew over. And I think the most important thing that we did was we didn't immediately go to Barcelona, and we didn't immediately stay with our host families. We went to a beach town called Sitges, which also hosts a film festival. That's on the side. But Sitges was such a great place for us to just bond, just as students, just as being excited. The tears that we cried at the airport when we left, not knowing what we were going into, and then now accepting this new reality and bonding with each other. Many of us, of course, came from boarding school, so being away was already something we were used to, but this was a whole different level of that. And so coming together, the bonds that you made, the friendships that you have, the conversations that you have, it just prepared us so well for when we then lived with our host families, and then also just the adventure every day of going to school. It's just there's so many little things that you learn about yourself and about the world, but really about yourself in these situations that you carry with you. And I think from a parental perspective, it's the kind of things that, I'd want my children to, know how to do in terms of navigating the world. And sometimes the only way that you can do that is just to get out there. And the great thing about school year abroad is that, you really do learn so many things being outside of the classroom. But the one caveat is that you're not losing any of that classroom learning. The biggest irony is, I'm living in Spain, but the English teacher that really was the one who for me helped me become a writer, want to do this professionally, was Gary Hendrickson, although we knew him as H. And so that was the irony, is being abroad was where I found my voice, strangely enough. At the same time, I didn't miss any of the standardized testing. So I didn't lose any steps, my junior year, coming back to Hotchkiss my senior year. So I know that there are people that are afraid, okay, if I leave for a year, am I going to be out of sync for college and everything else? I was a sophomore in a rut. I came back from Spain, a senior with a mission. Made the honor roll, got into virtually every single college that I applied to, and just basically had a confidence that I didn't have before I left. Mm-hmm. And there's just something about the experience that it really buoys you in ways that you can't even really imagine.
I definitely echo that. I think it's the best kept secret around. People, they're so afraid of what they're giving up. I don't think they realize what they gain.
Yeah, true.
I'm going to throw in a question here. Margaret and Cheo, when I meet with alums, I ask them to give me the SYA moment that they take away, that one interaction either with H as a teacher or whatever. Do you guys have that SYA moment that you kind of take with you from France and Spain?
So many, but I don't know, just a few. Well, one, those of us who were lucky enough to experience being around Angel Villalta. Senor Villalta was such an incredible teacher, and I don't remember all of the art history that I learned that year, but it's just the appreciation of art. it's being able to describe light, in terms of light and darkness and use of shadow, and appreciating Goya, and being able to see, not only just talk about these paintings, but then actually go and see them. It's stuff that I use all the time in terms of being able to talk to a cinematographer about how a scene should be lit, or just understanding and appreciating the aesthetics and the beauty of the world, and being able to put that into words. It's just, I don't know if there's just one moment. I mean, I think the one thing that they warn you about, and then when it happens, you're just so excited about, is when you finally start learning your language so well that when you go to sleep, you actually begin dreaming in the language, and people are talking around you in the language. So like you're subconscious, and you're hearing people talk in different accents and different ways that aren't you, but you've somehow absorbed. And then also when you're able to kind of keep up with that, it just all of a sudden, when you wake up, you have a confidence. Well, hey, maybe I'm learning this stuff. Like maybe I can do this, But there's so many different things about that year. I can't put it in one situation or one moment, but we had such a great time,
Yeah, I sort of agree. There were so many great moments. I think one of the highlights, though, was the quality of the teaching.
Yes.
We had a phenomenal teacher from Exeter, actually, who was our English teacher. And we had a great math teacher, but the local teachers, and especially the woman who taught the French AP literature course, that doesn't even exist anymore, that AP. It's, I guess, considered too challenging these days, but she was a university professor. And I just remember her reading one day from Phèdre, which is a famous play that we had to read by Hassan, and she was so dramatic. And she just instilled in us this, love of French literature and this discipline. We had to write 5 or 10 page essays in French every week to prepare for this exam. And, I had great teachers at St. Paul's, but I think it was learning a different way, because they do teach and write differently in French, and just, hearing from a native who was passionate about the literature she was teaching. So, but anyway, there were many great moments. And I think about all the trips too, and how much it was so great to explore France. And I learned so much and saw so much and had so many adventures.
Yeah.
Which I won't describe.
Well, it's funny because I would love to at some point visit the campus in Zaragoza. I know that a lot of us Barcelona alums wear Barcelona like a badge of honor, because it was just such an interesting city to be a part of, and we have so many memories of that building, and so many memories of the Ramblas, and just walking around. But at the same time, I think no matter where you went, no matter what campus you're on, you have that similar bond to your environment. And I agree with Margaret about the quality of the teaching. It was one thing, that was the thing when I learned, Hotchkiss was great for vocabulary, and oh my God, the way that we used to do verb lengths over and over again. I was like, why are we doing this? And all of a sudden, when you're in Spain, it's like wax on, wax off in the Karate Kid. You have this muscle memory of all these things that you memorized, but that you're now actually applying. And that's really, I think, the difference is when you're abroad, all of a sudden you're applying the things that you learned at home, so to speak. And so it was the application of all that memorization of the vocabulary and the verbs and the conjugations that you're now using in real time, and having the training to do that. But then at the same time, in terms of English, in terms of writing, there were these things, you learn all the rules of writing because of grammar and because of some of the incredible teachers you have before. But then when you're actually, the thing about H was he really unlocked, how to apply these things that you learn to your own particular voice. And, that's why I always credit him, probably more than any other teacher I've had, is really him and also this teacher, Robert Hawkins. But between the two of them, they were the ones that really gave me my confidence in terms of being able to write, in terms of thinking that I had a voice, and then having the courage to really follow it where it led. And that would not have happened had I not gone to Spain.
Yeah. And Cheo, we got to get you over there. And we'd love for you to talk to the students. That would be just a great moment for them. It would be really helpful. And I know, Holland, we're kind of closing in on the end of the program. Do you have a last question that you'd like to ask, or one that's come in?
Well, one of the questions that I have, which I think had come in before, which I thought was a great question for both of you. What advice would you give to someone who is starting out? So to all these kids who are just arrived, they've been in country now for about a month, and what would you tell them if you had 2 minutes to say this is what you should know in this first month of being on SYA?
Do you want to go first, Margaret, or?
Sure. Well, I guess my advice would be, first of all, don't be discouraged if you don't understand anything, because it will become easier. Second, don't be afraid to go out there and just start speaking, make mistakes. The only way you learn and get better is this includes your host family and so forth, correcting your language, and try not to speak too much English. As Cheo said, that will impede your progress in the language. And so just stick with it, and sign up for every opportunity you can get, because it's just, time's going to go by so fast and you don't realize how much is on offer. That's my advice.
Yeah, I would offer similar advice. It's going to be hard at first. People are going to hang up the phone on you. You're going to go to stores, and some people will roll their eyes when you ask for things 2 and 3 different times incorrectly. But you have to, failure is important from the standpoint of, once you get used to sounding bad, once you get used to failing, then it gets easier. You basically gain the stamina to try more things and to become more confident. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And it's something that, again, I'm reminding myself of. I'm training for my first marathon, and I'm not a runner. And when you first run, it always hurts. It's just, the miles are terrible. And then you look around at people and they're just running past you, and like it's the easiest thing in the world. And you just want to give up and go home, but you got to stick to it, and, own your miles. And eventually you learn how to breathe, and eventually, you'll get to the point when you can just finish and just keep going. And then it just gets better. Like, today it's like, if you could have told me I was going to run 12 miles without someone chasing after me with a gun, I wouldn't have believed you. but I did. And again, that's something I learned from my time in Spain. It's just like, it's okay to not be the best. It's okay to not understand and to find your way, but don't give up, because it gets easier. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. It really does.
Oh, this conversation can go on. It's so much fun to hear you guys. And I would just say, obviously distinguished alums, but also incredibly thoughtful. And I'm honored to be part of your universe. Thank you so much. And I know, Holland, you feel the same way.
I do. Thank you both so much. And thanks for being with us today and being such an inspiration to all of us.
Yes. I'll make 2 quick plugs at the end here. One is, again, if you know people who will be in this wonderful array of these alums, let us know. And we would love annually to honor our alumni. And 2, that we are getting back out on the road. You'll get an email about where we're going to be this school year. And also, there's an SYA Now that we publish through email once a month, and there's a lot of interesting articles and there. In fact, we did highlights. There's you guys would be interested to know there are 3 people who've been SYA connected or are coming back. So in our math teachers in France and Spain, both of whom taught in the early 2000s, they're at the end of their careers. One woman from Hotchkiss, Letty Roberts, who's back at in SYA France. She loved it so much, she's retiring and she wants to come back and teach. And Bill Scott from Andover is over in Spain. So great to see. And Ned Henningsen, who was a student in Italy, is now teaching English there this year. So we open up those spots to everyone, but it was just kind of wonderful and serendipitous that they all came to me and I said, you're perfect to come on back. So in the SYA now, we highlighted them in the most recent edition. You might want to read more about them. So again, thank you one and all. And a special thanks to Susan McLean, who's behind the curtain here, helping us with all of this and does a terrific job of connecting alums. She's like an old telephone operator. She's making all these connections for us of alums over time. So again, thank you one and all. And a special congratulations to Margaret and Cheo. Great to see you both. And Holland, thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, Susan. Okay. Bye now.